and we are not younger. And what about our partner? The existential real question is, are we forming enough families, stable enough and supported enough to sustain a society economically, emotionally, and demographically? Right now, in countries after we're seeing in many places that birth rates below replacement. Hello everyone, I am here in a better sunny Mexico City, and today I want to talk in something that I'm still in the men family mindset, and talking to my patients. There is a very hard but necessary conversation happening about today's sexual marketplace. Psychologists like Dr. Orion Taraban describes 5 endgames for women and men, and talking about hypergamy, sexual market value, and the brutal mathematics of modern dating. A lot of that analysis is sharp. It doesn't capture something real about how men and women are colliding in this moment and what is happening outside. After my divorce, I needed to go back again after a while and trying to put everything on the table, and if I were ready to reduce every risk to get or to evolve as a high man value, whatever that means. And the important variable in all of this at the end of the game, it is what really at stake is not just who you end up with, but whether you ever get to build a family at all. And that is where infertility, time, and the idea of the family as the nucleus of the society change the narrative, change the conversation completely. Because while outside trying to find someone, at the end, the diagnosis and the market, it's not correlated. Let's start with what this type of analysis gets right. We are seeing fewer stable relationships. 50% chances of getting divorced after the first 2 years of marriage, my case. Definitely fewer marriage, fewer news of the society, less sex, less commitment, fewer long-term projects between two people. Why? Because in many Western countries, young women are doing extremely well. And congrats, and this is something that we need to pursue for sure. But the timing, we need to find a way about mobility, financial independence. Young men and women, and a man average, are lagging behind in income, in purpose, and trajectory. So you add to that a very old mechanism, female hypergamy. The tendency to look for a partner who is at least equal, and often above, the majority of the time they are requesting that, to give them status and stability. The result is a shrinking pool of acceptable partners. So you get what Dr. Orions described, a hierarchy of endgames for a woman, from winning a top 10% man to lowering standards to ended up with a man they don't truly respect, they don't truly admire, to remaining and creating these behavioral economics and dating economics, brutally honest, but it is not the whole picture. The whole today's picture, going outside and trying to build the nucleus of your society, the biological time and the reproductive reality, it's where we need to think twice. Where I think the sexual marketplace frame becomes dangerously incomplete. In every other marketplace, if you don't buy today, you can usually buy later. You can delay a car, a trip, a house, but this is the best investment. Prices in other markets may change, but the product still exists. Reproduction doesn't work like that. Human fertility follows a curve in time, not a belief, not a trend, a biological curve. For women, egg quality declines with age. For men also, sperm quality, it's also deteriorating globally because of what we eat, non-exercise, stress, chronic stress, inflammatory lifestyles, and late childbirthing are reshaping what is biological possible, not just what is emotional desirable. It's about time. So while we are busy optimizing careers, creating options on dating apps, negotiating standards, and postponing commitment, postponing family, time is no neutral. We are not just men and women waiting for a better offer. We are also spending non-refundable and reproducing time and cells and endometrial receptivity and morphology of our sperms. And I'm not saying this is a patronizing way. I'm saying it's someone who works in the space where data and tears meet. In a fertility patients that, as my case right now, is affecting the timeline, and we need to discuss, and we need to put this in the level that we need to end up becoming a valuable man, and it's taking 40 years of our time, and we are not younger. And what about our partner? The existential real question is, are we forming enough families, stable enough and supported enough to sustain a society economically, emotionally, and demographically? Right now, in countries after we've been seeing in many places that birth rates below replacement, delay childbearing, push into the biological fragile zone, highly capable adults who did everything right in their career script, but now as my patients ended up with no realistic path to the family they assume will just happen later. At that scale, the conversation stopped being about who gets the top 1 to 10% of men and women that they are in the best version of themselves. Start being which societies would actually reproduce themselves and on what terms. This is not longer a gossip topic. It's a structural long-term question about the future of our species. If we see through the lens of fertility in the conscious way and in a timeline, let's take the 5 endgames that are described for women and men and look at them through the lens I work with every day with my patients, 1/6% of the population. If we see it in bioethical, in the family scenario to build, and on paper this looks like the one on the game, if we can practice what often look that appears as many options to have. But let's start thinking consciously with who we want to commit, to have a strong incentive to extend the families. The reproductive decision right now needs to be seen by these lenses, and closer to the cliff where fertility treatment it's no longer a nice to have, but the only remain door scenario. If she lowers her price just enough to still get a high value man, in reproductive terms, that might create a relationship that it's negotiable, flexible, but internally unstable. Patients around 36, 37, if they haven't froze their eggs, their decision of having kids happens under a chronic stress later on, unresolved resentments, or on a constant feeling of I had to bargain myself down. The emotional environment into which a child arrives, it's already compromised. Other scenarios, if she ends up with a lower value man, either by choice or under pressure of time or family or society, the theory of less desirable product. But here is the paradox I see in real life. Some of the most functional families I encounter are not built with the 10% individuals. We are not. That's why we're human beings, that we are facing infertility. But I face that with people who are willing to place the family itself as the center of their value system. The problem is not being with someone less than ideal on paper. The problem is arriving there with panic, with time pressure, or a quiet despair. Instead of through a conscious and honest decision, that's when frustration becomes chronic and children grow inside a story of you were born from a compromise instead of you were born from a decision. Another scenario, she neither secures nor settles and remains unpartnered and childless. Data suggests only a minority consciously choose lifelong childless as a project of life in a woman or in a man. The majority drift they indirectly through repeated postponement, through strategies optimized for short-term autonomy, and through a complete absence of a structured dialogue about reproductive timing and options. Again, the issue is not judging those who choose not to have children. This is not what I'm here for. I'm not judging. I'm just putting on the table the issue that it's a huge portion who arrives there by default, not by decision. And it's none of these scenarios those the classic market analysis truly ask. What happens to the desire to form a family and to the capacity to do so under which conditions? Which of these possibilities of women and men that we can choose from the market outside, and we are in the vibration to attract someone that at the end It's in our value, in our level, and from there we can build something together without keep fighting about men's or woman, not sexualize this. We don't need to delay responsibility. We need to frame male vulnerability as something valuable, and we frame female desire for a greater good, for the future of our species and for the nucleus of the society, because it's a conscious choice. Creating a family and not left to chance, we do not systemically educate people with fertility windows, the impact of stress and lifestyle on reproductive health.